Today is Saturday, August 13th. With so much talk about inflation and a recession, it would seem like the entire economy is shrinking and suffering. But really, the labor market is still going strong. The vast majority of people who want jobs have one. Unemployment is at its lowest point in 5 decades. And hiring has surged this summer, with the most recent jobs report exceeding expectations. As our guest today says, this is the first time in recent memory that the jobs market is really separating itself from the current economy. So how could this impact you? Today, Kropp comes back on the show to break down what's behind the data and what this all means for the future. He's the vice president of research at Gartner, a consulting firm that advises business leaders around the world, including the ones making the hiring decisions. He shares the most reliable way to make more money in your career and why some people still regret taking the plunge. Plus, what does inflation do to your paycheck now? And what many companies are doing instead of giving raises. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Kropp, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So a lot of people have called this time in the labor market the Great Resignation because we're seeing more people quitting their jobs. Other people have said, no, it's really the Great Reshuffling. So I want to talk about how that all impacts wages. But first, can you just summarize what each means? And do you agree that it's actually a reshuffling more than a resignation?
So when people talk about Great Resignation, there's a sense that people are quitting and going to some other place. People get to other jobs to make more money, or people have just had enough and they're done working. So it's really a transition in the labor market. A reshuffling is more a sense of people just want to do different things. They used to be investment banker on Wall Street and they've realized that's no longer their calling in life. They want to go work at a dog rescue shelter. They just want something different that's come out of it. Both of those will eventually settle out. And then there's also a third, much more fundamental effect, which is that in the remote hybrid world that we're moving into, we're still going to see sustained higher levels of turnover. And the reason why is that, one, employees just have more choice in a remote hybrid world, that I don't have to move to change jobs. And two, one of the downsides that we see from remote and hybrid work is that employees are less committed to their employer.
In some surveys and government data have shown that workers who are switching jobs right now are more likely to earn a higher salary at their new workplace compared to the workers who have stayed put. So is that what you're seeing as well? And, I think you kind of already talked about what that says about the overall labor market, but anything else to add on that point specifically?
If you change jobs, on average, you're going to get about a 13 to 15% total compensation increase. If you stay in your job, on average, you're going to get about a 2 to 4% compensation increase. If your goal is to make more money, the best thing that you can do as an employee is change jobs and change companies. That's just the reality of the labor market that we're in. Why should I stay in my job doing what I've been doing if I can just go somewhere else and make 15% more relative to where I am? That also creates a whole series of long-term effects, though, that will then contribute to more churn. So if I'm working a particular job and someone comes into the same job that I've been doing and they're brand new to the company, but making 15% more than I am, that gives me all the reason in the world for me to then change jobs and go someplace else. The turnover that we've seen across the last 12 months are going to be a sustained feature of the labor market, not a temporary feature that we're going to get past at some point.
At the same time, though, there was a survey that we reported on from Jobless that found more than a quarter of the people who quit regret it. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's actually been a pretty sustained reality that we've seen for many years at this point. And what job switchers sometimes get wrong is they need to think about the whole value proposition that's associated with moving to a new company. It's about the compensation, it's about the development opportunities, it's about the growth opportunities, and so on. But one of the things that is often underestimated by employees who are switching jobs in this labor market in the way that work has changed is when we are all in person, most people had better emotional and social connections with their coworkers. They were more likely to have a friend at work. When you look at the people that are more likely to say they've regretted their job switch, it's not because they didn't make more money. It's because when they made that job switch, they lost the emotional and social connections that they had with their coworkers, and they're having trouble building them in the new work environment that they're in. That difficulty of building those new emotional and social connections with your coworkers is then just going to cause those people to quit again.
Well, speaking of the money that people are making, the Federal Reserve says wages are rising faster than in any other time since the mid-1980s. But with inflation still so high, how does that impact wages? Are they keeping up?
Now, when it comes to wages, this is a really interesting question. What is abundantly clear is that wages, on average, have not kept up with the rate of inflation. For the average employee, they've experienced about a 3% real wage cut because of inflation. Which begs the question, well, why are companies not keeping up? Why are they not offering more of a comp increase? And the big reason why is that companies, even after roughly almost a year of inflation, still tend to believe it's more transitory. And what they're afraid of is putting a inflation adjustment into compensation that creates a higher run rate cost for employees forever into the future. So companies are really hesitant to put that in because it becomes expensive and it's really difficult to take out. Instead, what we've seen companies doing is trying to provide other mechanisms to support employees financially that don't create the sustained run rate. So we've seen more companies give short-term cash bonuses to employees to support them. We've seen a lot of companies provide subsidies to pay for transportation because of higher gas prices, those sorts of things. So companies aren't really responding by increasing wages, but they are responding by creating other compensation mechanisms that are short-term to help support employees with higher cost of living and higher inflation.
Still ahead, why does there seem to be such a gap between the jobs market and the broader economy? Our guest today explains what many employers are afraid of that keeps them from laying more people off. That and more of our conversation coming up. But first, a quick break to thank our sponsors. The Newsworthy is brought to you by Thrive Cosmetics. If you're like me and you've been looking for a new beauty and skincare routine, I have your solution. Thrive Cosmetics has clean, high-performance products. They never have parabens, sulfates, or phthalates, so I feel confident putting these products on my skin every day. And here's another awesome thing about Thrive Cosmetics. Cause is in the name for a reason. Every purchase supports organizations that help communities thrive. Over the years, I've had to report on a lot of natural disasters, domestic abuse cases, and veterans who struggle to adjust after war. So I really appreciate that Thrive Cosmetics gives to organizations working on all of those issues and more. So far, I have their Brilliant Eye Brightener. It's a cream to powder highlighter stick. I love the Liquid Balm Lip Treatment that nourishes lips and gives them a great glossy look as well. And the best-selling Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. I now use it every day. The name explains it all. Now is a great time to try Thrive Cosmetics for yourself. Right now, you can get 15% off your first order when you visit thrivecosmetics.com/newsworthy. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS, thrivecosmetics.com/newsworthy for 15% off your first order. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by ZocDoc. If you're like my family, you like to pore over lists of reviews before deciding on where to book a reservation for brunch or dinner. So why not do the same when you're booking a doctor's appointment? With ZocDoc, you can see real, verified patient reviews to help find the right doctor in your network and in your neighborhood. ZocDoc is a free app that shows you doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them. Yep, that's the other key here. You filter your search to only show doctors that take your insurance, which is such a time saver. And on ZocDoc, you can find every specialist under the sun. Whether you're trying to straighten those teeth, fix an achy back, get a mole checked out, or anything else, ZocDoc has you covered. Plus, ZocDoc's mobile app is as easy as reserving that brunch spot online or getting delivery to your house. Search, find, and book doctors with a few taps. Go to ZocDoc.com/newsworthy and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/newsworthy, ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to my conversation with Brian Kropp. So the most recent jobs report exceeded expectations with 500,000 jobs added in July. And I believe that was about double what some economists were predicting. Did that surprise you?
In all honesty, it didn't. The reason why is that we've been surveying heads of HR about their hiring plans for the last several months. And despite all the talk about recession, economic worry, inflation, uncertainty, we didn't see any evidence that companies were planning on slowing their hiring. They see the labor market becoming a little bit less competitive, but more than half of companies are planning on actually increasing their hiring volumes across the next 3 months.
So what's going on, if you know? How are we hearing so much about inflation and a recession, as you mentioned? And yet the labor market is so strong. What are the reasons behind it?
Yeah, this is the first time that we've seen, at least in my memory or recollection, that the labor market is really separating itself from the broader economy. And that's occurring for a couple of reasons. One, the typical company that we work with is still about 7 to 10% understaffed relative to what they would want in terms of number of employees.
And is that because of the pandemic?
I think it's because of the pandemic, people being slow to come back to the workforce, and growth. Companies just need more employees now than they needed just 3 years ago to get everything done. The second reason that's going on is what companies are really hesitant to do is actually cut back on hiring and staffing because of what happened in the spring of 2020. At that point, a lot of companies cut back pretty dramatically on staffing. There were a lot of layoffs across a variety of different industries. And what happened was when the economy came back, those companies were left flat-footed because they didn't have enough workers to actually meet the demands of customers. So what CEOs are really hesitant to do is to put themselves in a situation where they can't meet demand because they simply don't have enough people.
So maybe they're thinking about inflation and the broader economy, but they're too afraid to change their employee layout.
Exactly. And as we've been surveying CEOs, one of the questions we've been asking them is, what is the biggest barrier to keep you from growing? It's not customer demand, it's lack of employees. They simply don't have enough people to meet the demand that customers are asking of them. And that's a combination of a variety of factors. I think there's been a lot of pent-up demand left over from the pandemic. Companies have been able to become a lot more cost-effective with remote and hybrid work, which has created more opportunities to grow and more ways to invest. So it is still a really hot labor market. There's still a lot of demand for hiring. There's still a lot of demand for talent. There's relatively few companies that are really laying off employees or decreasing their hiring.
What explains some of the big layoffs that we have seen?
Yeah, when you look at segments of the economy where there has been a slowdown in hiring or some layoffs, they really fall into three categories. One category is industries that are really interest rate sensitive. So think mortgage loans, for example. Second place is crypto. That as an industry really appears to have gotten out farther in advance from a hiring perspective than the demand was really there. And three is companies that bet really heavily on a remote future. The world is hybrid and it's going to be hybrid, but it's not going to be fully remote. So if you were a company that assumed that no one was ever going to go back to the gym and everybody was going to be exercising through a computer, then you probably overshot the target a little bit.
So going back to the companies that don't want to have any layoffs, but still maybe thinking about the broader economy, do you think they're making budget cuts elsewhere?
So companies that have adopted remote and hybrid work have actually achieved a lot of cost savings within how they run their business without really any sort of productivity impact. For a typical employee who comes into the office 5 days a week, the real estate costs associated with supporting that employee are roughly 30% of total costs, in addition to what you pay them. So just to make the math easy, if an employee makes $100,000 a year, the average company is paying an additional $30,000 a year for rent, electricity, cleaning, free coffee, all those sorts of things to support that employee. If employees are only coming in half the time, then you're only spending on average $15,000 additional per year for every employee who on average makes $100,000 a year.
Any final thought or final takeaway about the labor market today?
I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is that we're just in a brand new environment. We don't know the full implications of all of these trends that are there. We know that turnover is higher. We know that people have more choice. We know that emotional and social connections are weaker, but we don't know how this is going to play out across the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. One of the most interesting things out there is when you survey people and you ask them, where did they meet their spouse or their significant other? The most common one is through their friends. The second most common one is through their work. What happens to society when people are less likely to meet their future spouses through work, and there's fewer relationships that emerge out of that? That's just an example of one of the long-term potential societal trends that we don't know how it's going to play out. And there's going to be dozens more things like that will be the long-term, at this point, unknown impacts of a more remote and hybrid world. And it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out because we don't know what they are, but they're going to be societally changing as they play out.
Well, thank you so much to Brian Kropp for sharing his research and analysis with us today. For more of his insights, be sure to give him a follow on Twitter. Well, that'll do it for us today. Our regular episodes are available every weekday morning to help you start your day. We'll be back on Monday with our next 10-minute news roundup. Until then, have a great weekend.